Are you listening to the class? I have it on. You don't have to. You can just listen to mine. Just because nobody's speaking.
Alex, you may want to just mute everyone at this point because we are live.
Sure.
And then you can unmute me once you've made everyone else mute, and then we'll get ready to start.
Sure. How do I mute everyone at once?
You click on participants.
Oh, okay.
And then there's an option to mute all.
Yep, got it.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, wherever you are. It's a real pleasure and honor to welcome Alex Huberman, who is a medical student, but is really a Bayit alumnus, and who's the Huberman family are really very special members of our shul, very honored and treasured members of our shul. And Alex has not only been in medical school for the last few years, but also has made a name for himself in developing an expertise in the knowledge of the Temple Mount. Alex has taken a number of groups of people up to the Har HaBayit, up to the Temple Mount, and has given tours and explanations of what is going on, the current political climate, as well as much of the history and geography of Har HaBayit, of the Temple Mount. We're very proud of Alex's accomplishments, and even though the halachic poskim, the halachic decisors, are still conflicted about whether a Jew should or should not go up to the Temple Mount, there is a very, very strong group of poskim who do promote this activity. And so I felt it very important to give Alex this forum to be able to explain the work that he does, as well as to explain to us some of the secrets of Har HaBayit. This is especially important in light of the fact that the Temple Mount is under the jurisdiction of the Jordanian authorities, which means that there are so many things that we have to be concerned about the concealment of evidence of the Beit HaMikdash and the destruction of evidence as well. And so, Alex, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to give us this presentation. This is a perfect preparation for Tisha B'Av, when we mourn over the destruction of the temple. And your presentation today will hopefully give us a better insight and the ability to envision what we had on Har HaBayit. So, Alex, the floor is yours, please. You just have to unmute yourself. You need to unmute yourself, Alex. There you go.
All right. Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So welcome, everyone. Thank you, Rabbi Korobkin, for that wonderful introduction. As you said, there's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to the Temple Mount, including the halacha behind it, including the history, the political climate, as you so rightfully said. And we're going to focus today on what I call the hidden places of the Temple Mount, which we'll get into in a minute. Before I begin, I just want to let everyone know, everyone will be muted throughout this because there's a number of people here today. So if anyone has any questions, I definitely would suggest asking them. Don't be shy. If I have an answer, I will answer. And so feel free to write them in the chat box. I'm going to be looking at the chat box throughout this little talk. And yeah, so let's get started. As people are still coming, I can see logging on. I'm just going to say again, thank you very much to the Beit, the Beth Avram Yosef of Toronto congregation for hosting this. I am, as the rabbi said, an alumnus of the Beit, although I don't like that because I still come to the Beit when I come to Toronto. It is a home for me, but we're going to take the focus now to Har HaBait. And so without further ado, I'm just going to point out here in this picture that we have going here, that I have here up on the right. So we have here, this whole area is the Temple Mount. I'm not quite sure how to do a cursor here that everyone can see. But what you have here pretty much is this whole area where you see the golden dome and the square around it, and the square that surrounds that, the rectangle, or I should say the rectangle that surrounds that. All that is the Temple Mount. For those of you who have come with me up to the Temple Mount, again, this is not going to be a halachic shir, halachic discussion. We're going to focus on something else today, which you'll see. But whoever has come with me to the Temple Mount, so welcome back. For anyone whose first time it is, don't worry, we'll do a little bit of a more precise introduction onto the Temple Mount in just a moment. Just a few words about myself. As the rabbi said, I'm originally from Toronto. I've been living in Israel for the past almost decade. Throughout that time, I have been going up to the Temple Mount, so that's just over 10 years. And I've really seen a lot of changes on the Temple Mount, which I'll get to. Perhaps at the end, we'll touch on it. It's fascinating to see, and I've been a guide to the Temple Mount for the past around 6 years. The organization that I'm doing this through is called Biadenu. You can see it on the bottom left of the screen. And I just want to say a couple words about Biadenu, actually. Okay, so you have here, what I have are the goals of Biadenu, and I put there's a campaign, a fundraising campaign that's going on now for Biadenu. So I picked a few of the topics that concerns us the most in the past couple of years for Biadenu, and I put them here just as a sort of introduction to what we do, and then we'll get started with the actual presentation. Okay, so there are 6 principles here that we try to work on, which is number 1, our identity. That's, I think, the most important, which is to strengthen our identity as Jews in the land of Israel, with the Temple Mount as its center. Number 2 would be guiding on the Temple Mount. We make sure that there is a guide to the Temple Mount with a warm welcome to anyone who wants to come to the Temple Mount every single day that it is open. And the Temple Mount is open normally from Sundays to Thursdays. So that's the second one. The third one, education. We want to integrate the Temple Mount into Israeli education. We are in the Knesset. We are bringing the Temple Mount to the forefront of discussions there. As well as we are attempting to basically get it into the law. There's a law in Israel called Chok Mekomot HaKadoshim, which is the law of holy places, which the Temple Mount is for some reason not a part of that law. So we are attempting to change that. We have a legal arm as well, trying to remove some of these restrictions that are put mostly onto Jews, but as well as to anyone who's basically a non-Muslim. And as well as to basically prevent the destruction of antiquities that goes on in the Temple Mount, but we might go into that a bit later. These are not the goal of our discussion today. If anyone has a question, of course, as I said before, please feel free to put it into the chat. So basically, this little discussion today is going to be centered around a book written by Arnon Segal, who is in Israel. He's a known journalist. Specifically for the Temple Mount, he has, for the past maybe even 10 years, he's had every week in one of the Israeli newsletters, Makor Rishon, he's had a little section in there for the Temple Mount that he's been involved in for the past around 10 years. And he's just come out with a book called HaBait. I actually have it here, just like he has it in the picture. It's an excellent book. It is currently only in Hebrew. And so I'm going to be giving it in English. And so it'll be a little bit of an introduction if anyone wants to maybe work on the book, test out their Hebrew or so. That's also an option. Okay, so the way I've organized the discussion today is going to be pretty much, it's going to be similar to a type of tour. This isn't a tour. We're going to be talking about different places on the Temple Mount, but it's organized like a tour. And so the first thing to recognize here is to recognize where we are. I think that that's an extremely important reference point when you talk about the Temple Mount, Har HaBayit in general, and you see it in the news, and it's lately been coming more and more of a hot topic in Israel. Visiting the Temple Mount, Jews visiting the Temple Mount specifically. And so first off, we should have some reference points when we talk about the Temple Mount. And so what you see here, you have this big rectangle in black here that goes basically around the entire Temple Mount area. And these are the walls of the Temple Mount. Okay, this at the top of the picture, you have this little rectangle in a sort of broken black lines. That right there is the Kotel, the Kotel area, Chavat HaKotel, the Western Wall. As you can see, if you can picture yourself being at the Western Wall, and you see how big the Western Wall is, see how small it really is of the Western Wall of the Temple Mount. It is not a big portion of it, particularly when you take into consideration the entire Temple Mount. Of course, when we visit the Western Wall, it's outside the wall of the Temple Mount, and you enter into the Temple Mount through this, basically this gate here, which is in a red dot, right next to the Kotel. Of course, there are depends how you count, there are about 18 gates into the Temple Mount, and only one of them is for usage by non-Muslims. That's Sha'ar HaMughrabim, the Mughrabi gate, or as it's known colloquially among the Olei Har HaBayit, those who visit the Temple Mount, Sha'ar Halel. Okay, so that's number one, just to recognize where the borders of the Temple Mount are, and in reference to the Western Wall. That's number one. The second thing I want everyone to note here, because it's something we're going to be coming back to again and again throughout this discussion today, is the Golden Dome. Now, the Golden Dome is pretty much in the center of the Temple Mount, a little bit towards the west. The top of the page here is west, which makes sense. The Western Wall is at the upper portion of this picture. And so the Dome of the Rock is in the center, pretty much the center of this picture here. And we're going to talk about this little superimposed image here in just a moment. But that's important to know that the Golden Dome is not particularly a mosque, so to speak, although the structure was built by Muslims. Due to its octagonal shape, it is definitely not a mosque, seeing as it doesn't face any particular direction. The direction mosques normally face would be Mecca, and this is an octagonal shape, simply there to protect a site. And we're going to definitely dive into what is exactly there, the foundation stone, Even HaShtiyah. We're going to dive into that just a little bit later, but keep that in mind. All right, this is an important reference point. The other thing I want to point out here is this elevated platform, and you'll see it more in a few other pictures that we'll see. But there's an elevated platform that surrounds the Dome of the Rock in the center of the Temple Mount, and that is an important point, and we'll get back to that. Okay, so far we've done the Dome of the Rock, we've done the elevated platform. Now I want to take your attention to all the way to the left, which is the south of the Temple Mount, to the structure, the grayish structure on basically on the southern part of the Temple Mount on the left. That is Al-Aqsa. It's an important reference point just because when you see it, you will be able to sort of orientate yourself to where you are in the picture. As well, obviously, it's a very historical site. Those who have come with me to my tours, we talk about it extensively if we can. Fascinating stories over there. And the last thing I want you to note is the superimposed image of the temple, of the second temple more specifically. And you have here this blue part and this this sort of orangey part. The blue part is the basically the courtyard of the actual temple. The temple is this white image sort of in the middle, which has it's like a rectangle with a little bit of like sort of looks like a gate a little bit, which extends past it. And there's the Mizbeach, the altar, for those who know what that is, just outside of it. But this blue area is the courtyard of the temple. Now, we'll get back to all of this. Don't worry. We will talk about all this. We'll define things. We'll really get into it in just a couple of minutes. But these are just reference points. And then you have the women's courtyard just on the outside of that, which is the this orangey kind of square here. So we'll get back to that in just a short while, but that's basically what we have here. And a regular tour would start from this this red dot over here, Shar Halel, the Mughrabi gate, and you would go to the east. You'd pass Al-Aqsa, and you'd basically go around the Temple Mount on the periphery of it, not going towards the center of it. There are halachic reasons for that. There are also security reasons for that, that the police have taken upon themselves to basically take the Jews in this circuit, as opposed to through the middle area of the elevated platform. And so that's how a tour would normally go in, and that's how we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about the south of the Temple Mount, the east of the Temple Mount, the north of the Temple Mount, the west, and then we're going to go to the middle. Okay, so that's the first reference. Okay, and if of course I would love to hear questions. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to ask in the chat bar. Okay, so the next reference to know, we did where. Let's talk about when. All right, now just briefly, because you can talk about all of these things for hours, and we don't want to do that right now. We want to just talk about a specific topic. But I've noted here with these arrows a few parts of the history of Jerusalem that I think are important to know as reference points, just in general, and specifically as well. It will help us for this discussion here. So in the time before the Israelites, or the Jewish people, had built their temple on the Temple Mount, the area was in the control of Canaanites, of Egyptians. We have records of that as well. We have records about Jerusalem, which is in a letter towards, which was in a letter for that we found basically from the king of Jerusalem before the Jews had been there to the Pharaoh at the time. So Jerusalem had existed beforehand, which we'll get to in just a moment. But from about 1000, the dates are kind of hard here. From about 1000 BCE, before the Common Era, the Jewish people had established Jerusalem as their capital. King David had done that, where his son Shlomo, his son after him, Solomon, had built the temple after him. All right, so we have our first question here. I'll get back to that in just a moment. And the temple lasts from about 1000 BCE until around 586 BCE, where the Babylonians basically sacked Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and exiled the Jewish people, without getting into too many details about that. From that period onwards, I want to just focus on the next part of history here with the arrow, which is the Hasmonean Kingdom. The Hasmonean Kingdom, which is, the story of Hanukkah, is the story of basically them coming to power. They constructed certain things on the Temple Mount, which we might talk about. They altered the face of it, expanded the Temple Mount, and afterwards Herod, as well, at the end of the second temple period, as well, had expanded the entire Temple Mount area, which we'll maybe get to it a bit later. Afterwards, the Byzantines, the Christians, which was the split from the eastern split of the Roman Empire, they as well were in charge of the Temple Mount, 325 to 637 BCE. Afterwards, the Muslims with the Umayyads, the Abbasids, and afterwards the Crusaders. Basically, what I want to point out here is just you're familiar with these terms because I'm going to be referencing some of these a bit later. The Crusaders were basically responsible for the Temple Mount for about 100 years. And then the state of Israel as well, 1948, 1967, Israel has liberated the Temple Mount. Okay, so that's our reference for when. All right, so we've done where, we've done when. Let's now start talking about a little bit about this topic of what is hidden in the Temple Mount. What can we talk about that's hidden there? Some of these legends that we hear about, what do archaeologists say, all this kind of stuff, all the juicy info. Okay, so I want to talk about 4 things really: stone and water, brick and stream. All right, that could be another title for this whole talk here. And the first thing I wanted to mention, which I've mentioned in almost every tour that I give of the Temple Mount, and I don't like the word tour too much because the Temple Mount is the holiest place in Judaism, and tour kind of makes it sound like you're going, somewhere for fun. And it definitely is a wonderful experience to go to the Temple Mount, but I don't think tour is the right word for it. But I don't have another word, so that's what I'm going to be using in the time being. So the first thing I want to focus on is that time period before the Israelites, before the Jewish people had built the first temple. And in that time period, you have what you see here is you have a topographical map. What does that mean? What that means is it shows you the area that we're talking about, the Temple Mount, Jerusalem, all that, Mount Moriah specifically here, without anything on it, and also showing you the heights. Because in the end of the day, the Temple Mount is a mountain. It has a peak, and from there you only go down. And that peak, as you can see, where it says Mount Moriah, that line over there is basically the. I'm just gonna mute.
I got it on my phone.
Sorry, I'm gonna mute everyone. All right. So back to this. So Mount Moriah, where the words are mount are, where the N is basically the U and N. That is the highest point of the Temple Mount. Now, that's not where the Canaanites, and that's not where anyone else before the Jewish people had built pretty much anything. There was nothing there, or maybe there is something there. I'll talk about that in a second. But the actual settlement of Jerusalem, or Zion, or however you'd want to call it, was on the left here, on the lower parts of this, in what we call today Ir David, the city of David. That's really where the settlement, the Canaanite settlement, was, and that's what David had conquered. Now, in the Temple Mount itself, again, that's where it says Mount Moriah. There was nothing built there, and so our sources in the Tanakh, in the Bible, have told us that David HaMelech, King David, had bought that area. He bought it from a Jebusite, from a Canaanite, called Aravna or called Arnon, depending if you're reading Divrei Yamim or you're reading some of the other books in the Tanakh. But that area had not been settled. There had been no one living there, and so it's very interesting to note that it was bought, not conquered. And so now that we've said that, we can talk a little bit about something very, very, very interesting in my opinion here. As someone has rightly noted, it's not tour but Temple Mount experience. That's very true. It is the Temple Mount experience on a tour. Thank you. And okay, so what we have here is something very, very interesting. And when I learned this, I'm going to be honest, I was kind of, as the people say today, I was shook. It's a very strange concept to me. And so what you have here on the right, you have a sort of aerial view, I guess, like sort of, from a camera on top of the Even Ashtiya, of the rock that's within the dome of the rock. All right, we mentioned the Dome of the Rock before. That's the gold dome that's in the middle of the Temple Mount. So in there, you have what you see here on the right. You sort of have this room here. As you can see, it's a circular type of room. As we noted, the building itself is octagonal, so this is the inside of it. And you literally have a rock that is surrounded by this gate. Excuse me. How do I go back here? Let me see here. Oh, sorry about this. Oh, I don't know what just happened. Excuse me for a moment. One moment, everyone. I'm sorry about this. Sorry about this, everyone. Just one moment. Technical difficulties.
That's what happens when you show pictures of the Harabite. Greater power is taking over here.
Exactly, right? Maybe it wasn't meant to be seen, the foundation stone. But okay, here we are. 1 second. Let's start a new share here. All right, thank you everyone for your patience. Does everyone see that? Okay. So as I was saying before, you go into the Dome of the Rock and you have this structure here. You have this basically a rock that is in the center of this building, of this golden dome, beautiful building, and it looks like that. And what it basically is that is you're looking at the top of the mountain, right? That's what's interesting here. The topography really does play a role here. It's the holiest part of the mountain, and it's also the top of the mountain. It fits. And what I wanted to draw your attention to here, and we're going to come back to the foundation stone in a little bit. We're going to talk about what it means and what it is. But on the note of this being, originally something that had been in use by the Canaanites, by the Canaanim, the Yevusim, there is a theory here. This is how it looks, the rock right now. Now, if you note in the top left of the rock, you'll note this sort of hole there. This sort of, circular, black dot that's in the top left of this picture I'm showing you. That's a hole. And it's not the only hole that exists on the Temple Mount. If you could see on the left here, there are a number of these holes noted around the Temple Mount. That's every one of these circles. If you just to orientate yourself here, this octagon, of course, in the middle is the Golden Dome, and the yellowish circle in the middle is this hole that you see on the top left of the screen of the rock. And there's all these little dots, other little dots here, other points in the Temple Mount were in the bedrock of the Temple Mount itself, in the bedrock, not in the structure, but the actual foundation rock of the Temple Mount. You have these holes, which are all very similar holes. And here's a little zoom in on it. You can see here at the bottom, there's this sort of like this sort of beam that has a light on a chain. That's the hole from close up. All right. Very interesting. Now, what is this exactly? What are the leading theories on it? And so there are two leading theories on this. As it says here, it's cylindrical, 60 centimeter radius hole. It's pretty big, right? Above a cave, underneath the Even Ashtia, underneath the dome of underneath the rock itself of the Dome of the Rock. What the Muslims call the Tzachra, the rock, and what we call the Even Ashtia, the foundation stone. Okay, so here there are actually two theories here. So the first one is the one that really got me, because I thought this is the holiest place in Judaism. Might have been actually a grave site for Canaanim, for the Canaanite, for the people that had lived there before the Jewish people had built the temple there. It might have been a Jebusite grave site from the end of the 3rd millennium, which would have meant that when Avraham himself had come to sacrifice his son, Isaac, Yitzchak, there would have already been some sort of grave site there, which is fascinating. Now, why do archaeologists like Gugonin here that I've put think that this might be some sort of grave site? There have been similar graves found in Hebron, in Efrat, in Beit El, in more places around the country, all from that time period, as well as there might have been multiple grave sites on the Temple Mount itself. That's something that an archaeologist by the name of Gonin has stated. And there's an interesting Jewish source that attests to something similar, which is what I thought was very, very, very fascinating. And there are, of course, halachic implications for all of this, dealt with extensively throughout the Jewish sources, which was that Gulgolet Arnan HaYevusi Matzu Mitachat LaMizbeach. Then in the times of Chizkiyahu, which was a time of tshuva, a time of repentance, and so people had become much closer to the Temple Mount and to the temple built by David and Shlomo. We see here that at the times of Chizkiyahu, they conducted a search and they found underneath the Mizbeach, very close to the Dome of the Rock, very close to there, they found a skull of someone buried there, which the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, has stated that this is the skull of Aravna himself, which is you got to ask yourself, if David HaMelech bought the Temple Mount from Aravna, how can Aravna himself then be buried there? So that's something that's talked about in the Jewish sources and the commentaries on the Yerushalmi, on the Jerusalem Talmud. But it's just a fascinating concept that there might actually be people buried under the Temple Mount, under the holiest place in Judaism. And this is dealt with in Jewish sources and halachic sources as well. Fascinating topic. Just one more point on this, that in the city of Efrat, a skull was found buried, a lone skull, I should say, was found buried on purpose there with a hole, similar to what they found on the Temple Mount. And so the fact that this Talmudic source has stated that they've discovered in the times of Chizkiyahu, which was many, many, many years before the Yerushalmi Talmud was written, the fact that they've discovered a skull there is actually very, very interesting in light of archaeology. So that's the first explanation for that hole. The second explanation there is this concept of a path to the Aron HaKodesh, the path to the Holy Ark, the Ark of Covenant, which was basically wrought, basically made by in the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, by Bezalel. You can read about it in the book of Exodus. They built the Holy Ark and put inside the tablets that they had received at Sinai. And according to Jewish sources, and I put here a source, actually the Rambam, Maimonides, who of course lived much further, way after the people that he's talking about, but he condenses a few sources together, and so I thought that it was relevant. He writes here that there was a stone, I'm translating here, there was a stone in the Holy of Holies. Again, we said the Holy of Holies was in the Golden Dome. And I'm not going to get into the discussion on exactly if it was there. Maybe it was moved a little bit north, maybe it was moved a little bit south. But I'm not going to get into that right now. Taking it for a given that the foundation stone is the place of the Holy of Holies. And so the Jewish sources state that there was that Shlomo, when King Solomon, he built the temple on the Temple Mount, he had installed as well a system of tunnels, of caves actually, that run underneath the Temple Mount, which there are, and we're going to talk about, which are very confusing and difficult to discern where you're in there, which part of the Temple Mount you are when you're in these caves. And because Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, knew that the temple would be destroyed, and he wanted there to be some sort of safeguard for the Holy Ark, the Ark of Covenant, the Aron HaBrit. He wanted there to be some sort of safeguard for it, and so he built this tunnel network as a sort of safeguard. And so this hole might actually lead down as a sort of pipe to all the way down to where the ark is buried, and as the Jewish sources have stated, that it was Yoshiyahu, King Josiah, who had hidden it in the place that it was, but in maybe a couple levels lower. Anyways, that's another theory that people like to quote on this, and so I brought it as well. So these are the two theories on that topic. Okay, so what I have here as well, let's orientate ourselves here. I have a map here. Forget the red circle. I didn't bring it because of the circle. I brought this map just because I like all of these. As you see, there's all this blue on the map, and the blue are basically these not the tunnels themselves, but the cisterns that tunnels lead to, which is fascinating. Underneath the Temple Mount, there's a lot of water. Okay, there's a lot of water. There's a lot of caves. Okay, and now I think I'm gonna just put in a point here that archaeology is actually something that is illegal to do on the Temple Mount. It's pretty much always been illegal to do on the Temple Mount. No one digs on the Temple Mount. Nobody comes in to measure things on the Temple Mount. Archaeologists I'm referring to. These are things that sadly are not done because there's just, for anyone who's been up to the Temple Mount, you'll see right away how much just raw archaeology, like just pure archaeology there is on the Temple Mount, untouched, untamed, and there's a lot to discover there. The only real time that that archaeologists had been pretty much allowed in some measure onto the Temple Mount had been the late 1800s. Okay, so this was through the PEF, the Palestine Exploration Fund, which was a fund that is British-led by the British government, together with the Ottomans. All right, so if you recall, before 1948, it was the British who had responsibility, the mandate over not only the British Mandate of Palestine, but as well as the Temple Mount. And so before that was the Ottomans, and the British were had a relationship with the Ottomans, who were a failing empire at that time. And so the Ottomans, which didn't like there to be archaeologists on the Temple Mount, then they being Muslim, they had made a deal, they cut a deal with the British that basically they would allow these archaeologists to come in on condition that they conduct studies over how the water sources of Jerusalem and how long Jerusalem can withstand a siege, which is an interesting idea. They brought them in, and indeed they found that underneath the Temple Mount, there was enough water to last for years. And that's how much water there is to provide the entire city with water for years. Okay, so now I want to bring you back to what we're looking at right here. You see all of the different water sources on the Temple Mount, the octagon again in the middle, the golden dome, the square around it being the elevated platform that I was referring to earlier. Okay, and okay, so we have a question here. Where is Solomon's stable? Solomon's stable, or called in Hebrew Ovot Shlomo, Solomon's stables, was in this, is the area that they call, if you look at the map we're looking at now, the bottom left portion of the map, where you see all these kind of like these kind of black boxes on the bottom left part of this map. That's again the southern portion of the Temple Mount. The southern, I should say, the southern east part of the Temple Mount, and that's where the area that they call Solomon's stables, which of course would not make sense to actually say that Solomon kept horses there. The reason being that this part of the Temple Mount that it's on was actually not even part of the Temple Mount during Solomon's time, which is interesting. For those who have come with me on my tour, I talk about the extension that King Herod, at the end of the Second Temple period, he extended the Temple Mount, which included most of this area. You see like all these black dots, so all of that, all the way towards the west, all the way up. That whole area was added on. It's not really originally part of the Temple Mount, for sure not in the First Temple period. Okay, that's just on that for a second. But now I want to draw your attention to, if you can see the number 8 on this water cistern here. You know, picture the Kotel, the Western Wall, and you walk directly from there where it says Barclays Gate, all the way straight, and you get to 8, which is the biggest cistern that we have underneath the Temple Mount. All right, so what is with this cistern? So it's called the Great Cistern. In Hebrew, what they call Hayam Agadol, the big sea, which has its roots in Talmudic literature. And what is this Great Cistern? So again, there hasn't been any archaeology done on the Temple Mount except for the late 1800s, where some archaeology was done. And You can find today, as you see, I brought here a picture, this kind of cube looking thing on the ground here. This is the bottom picture I have right now up, with sort of like a green hatch to it. Now, this is a picture taken modern day. This is a picture that it could be even that I took this picture, I don't remember. That's what you see today. Now, if you open that hatch, you go up to the picture right above. The square, the kind of like light square on the top of that picture on above is that entrance that you're looking at on the bottom. It opens up into this massive, massive, massive expanse, really, underneath the Temple Mount. It's absolutely incredible, up to 12,000 cubic meters of water. Like, it's unbelievable how much water it can be contained in just this space underneath the Temple Mount. And this picture that you see here is the only picture that we have of it, basically drawn in 1872 by William Simpson, would come as part of the PEF. And you can imagine at that time, 1872, what kind of light sources did they have, really? They go into there, it's pitch black. What sort of light sources did they have to even look around? Not much. And so the picture that we have here is literally the only source we have for what it even looks like inside of there, sadly. But what was this Yam HaGadol? What was it? Because it seems to be not really I should say, it doesn't seem to be a natural cistern. It seems to be an artificial, human-made. When was it? And so Binyamin Mazer, who's one of the top archaeologists throughout Israel, had stated that this was a water source for the pilgrims, for the Olei Regel, for those Jews who were coming during the holidays to visit the temple, the second temple. This was a water source for them, which is mentioned throughout Talmudic literature, rabbinic literature. And additionally to that, Lena Rittmeyer, who is Binyamin Mazer's top Talmud Mufak, if you want, he's his top student. He, an archaeologist as well, he argued that as well. Originally, the stones for the temple itself of the second temple were taken from this area, at which point the walls were plastered, making this as well as an additional use of a water cistern for the pilgrims coming to the temple. Really fascinating. And I brought here as well a story from the Talmud here. So I'm just going to read this quickly. There was a story with Nechunya, who was he was sort of like the digger of pits, it says, really not doing his name justice, and his daughter had fallen into a great pit, most likely this pit we're talking about. And the question was, could you even survive if you fall in there? And they go up to Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, big prolific rabbinic figure at the time, and they ask him, for the first hour, they ask him, is she okay? He says she's okay. Second hour, is she okay? She's okay. Third hour, they go to him and they ask, is she okay? And he says she's come out of the pit. And they ask, and they go to his daughter and they ask her, who brought you out of the pit? And she said, this goat with an old man riding the goat had come down into the pit and taken me out. And they go to Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa and they ask him, are you a prophet? And he says, I'm neither a prophet nor a son of a prophet, but something that a righteous person does for the public. There's no way that his children as well would be hurt by that thing. And so it could be really could be that Nechunya was the one who even had been responsible for creating this Yam HaGadol. I have here a picture of a pit that had opened up on the Temple Mount. Let's do it very quickly. This had just happened maybe a few months ago, I believe, maybe about a year ago or so. A huge pit had opened up on the Temple Mount. This is the Jordanian Waqf looking at it. And they're looking down, and this pit just opened up one day on the Temple Mount, on the route that we all take. And this is how it looked. Immediately, they covered it up with cement. Okay. So now we have this beautiful, beautiful picture here of the Temple Mount. Absolutely stunning. And I want to point here one thing because we are pressed for time. The elevated platform in the middle, which you can see, which is where the dome of the golden dome is, and that square around it is the raised platform. You can see steps leading up to it. So that should be a square. However, you can see on the eastern side, right, which is on the right of this page, you can see that the angle of it is off. The angle, it's not a square. It's you know, a kind of strange shape that with that angle. Now that's there on purpose. What is the story of that? Pretty much, you'll see in just a moment, the temple was not set as you would think, sort of like, you know, kind of like facing the wall. It was off. The angle of the original temple was off. See if I can find a picture here. As you can see, so this is like another picture of the temple, and so you can kind of see here that this kind of like bottom area square is the women's courtyard. Is Rat Nashim, which I pointed out before. That was that orange place, that orange square, and then the courtyard is around the temple structure with the altar in the middle, and the angle of the temple was a little bit was basically that exact angle that we're looking at. And how do we know that? Because we have a source stating from the Talmud Yerushalmi again that the Nevi'im Rishonim, the first prophets that we had, actually tired themselves. They worked tirelessly in order to create an axis, the exact axis with the rise of the sun, what's called the astronomical north-south axis, in order for the sun to constantly, as you know, like the sun rises in the east, but depending on the season, the sun might rise more in the north or more in the south. Now, at the time of the temple, they wanted the sunlight at sunrise to go through all of the gates. I kind of put it here, if you can imagine in red, the sun rising there in the east. They wanted the sunlight to go through all of these gates and touch the Holy of Holies inside the temple itself. Now, for most of the year, that might be fine, but you know, for what's called the summer solstice or the winter solstice, where the sun rises more in the north or more in the south, the angle might be off. And so in order to fix that problem, they had actually calculated the exact axis, north-south axis, astronomically with the sun. And what you saw earlier, that weird angle, is that exact angle. I believe it's off by something like 0.33 degrees, but it's been about 3,000 years since it was calculated. So it's just fascinating to note that. Moving on. So what we see here, you see here on the top, this is again like a picture of the temple looking in through the women's courtyard. And I want to point out that there are old pictures that we have. I want to point that out to you in just a second, where we can actually see this angle as well as parts of the women's courtyard. So if you have a look here on the right, you kind of have this is a sort of like an aerial view of the Temple Mount from the British mandate. Before they added in trees, before the Jordanian Walk was around to change anything on the Temple Mount. And you can see I have these black arrows pointing towards there. You don't see these today, but these lines that you see here are actually part of walls, which are literally the same. It follows the same axis that I pointed out earlier, showing that the entire structure was on this axis of the temple. Despite the eastern wall of the Temple Mount not being on that same axis, the temple itself was, which is just a fascinating thing to note here, that you can't see these anymore, and of course you can't dig there, but they were there, and this is the aerial footage to show it. Okay, another thing to point out here on that same part of the platform are these, is what Rittmeyer had actually noted, that there might be, if you can note these red arrows on the picture on the left, this is like that part of the raised platform. There are these arches there. He's noted that these arches are in the same places that would appear to line up with our sources on where the Levites, the Leviim, would keep their musical instruments. Again, no archaeology can be done. This is just based off of a surface glance by archaeologists. Okay, Another cistern I wanted to mention, and we're running close for time here, so I'm gonna move through this a little bit more, is called the Bor Hagula, which is the Gula cistern, a Gula being Aramaic for a sort of container. And this, what it says here, Bo Mispar Chamesh, the cistern number 5, which you can see on the picture on the right, is this kind of strange shape. Now, this is a cistern. This is a type of shape for cisterns that exists in all different parts of the country, including as well in up into Syria as well, of Bronze Age types of cisterns. So it's most likely from that period. And I want to note that it's half of it inside the courtyard and half of it in the lesser sanctified area outside the courtyard, which was most likely used to clean and I have a source here as well, but I don't really have time to go into it, but to clean this is inside the temple building, to clean the parochet, the huge curtain that would separate between the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh Kadoshim, and the rest of the temple. And so they would likely take it there. It says in the source, it took 300 people to carry it and to dry it, fitting the place, not only the place, but also the size of that cistern. Okay, again, we're on the east side of the Temple Mount. And something that you'll see there, especially those who have come with me on a tour, are these wooden beams kind of thrown under, looking like garbage on the picture on the top right. There are wooden beams. You kind of see one peeking out. And so these are pictures that I brought from the Israel Antiquities Authority, which in my very humble opinion needs to be doing a much better job. And the reason being that, as you can see, some of these basically in the 20s, about 100 years ago, there was a huge earthquake that shook Israel. So, every time there's an earthquake, the Al-Aqsa Mosque gets damaged. And you can see the picture here on the bottom of the beams that underwent a kind of reconstruction on its roof because it was damaged, and these beams were removed. Now, what's interesting about these beams? So some of these beams were actually acquired by a number of people. They were sold on the black market, these beams. And it's kind of like a recurring trope that anywhere pretty much in Jerusalem, that people used whatever was there, whatever materials there were, people used the conquerors used that to build their own things. And so these beams, some of them were acquired by a number of people, and who had conducted actually carbon-14 dating on some of the wood. Lots of them were cedars of Lebanon, and some of them, that by far not all of them, but some of them were actually about 3,000 years old, as well as cedars of Lebanon, which fits the description of how they were used in the first temple period. Which is fascinating. I mean, they should be under plexiglass or in some sort of museum taken care of. As you can see, they're just sort of thrown on the ground there. This is an important part of history with all these designs on them. Even it's kind of shocking the way that it's being held. All right, we have a question. Someone who was noting that he that there are stairs under the Dome of the Rock, which we will be getting to. Now, what I want to actually bring to your attention before I get to that, on the north side, what I call it here a historic note, there are a number of these sorts of notes on the outside walls of the Temple Mount, and we can't really see them today, most of them, because some of them are in actual buildings, like, for example, the one I brought here, is in a structure that was built, a sort of school that was built in the year 1368. All right, it's the Mamluk period. It's a Muslim period, and a archaeologist, a researcher by the name of Suknik, actually visited this madrasa in 1928, and he noted that there was a Herodian rock, or I should say Herodian brick. I mean, these things are massive, but he noted that there was one of them, which was, the foundation of the wall, which was burnt by oil being poured on it, along with this inscription. Now, this inscription is fascinating. It's actually, I think, inspiring. That someone who had visited the Temple Mount, a Jewish person who had visited the Temple Mount with his family from Greece, all the way back in the Byzantine times. All right, so that's very early, early on. It's like from like 300 to 600 or so CE. They wrote this in Hebrew. They wrote Hashem Elokei Tzvakot. May the God, the God of the hosts of heaven, Tivnei Habayit Hazeh, build this temple. B'chayei, in the lives of Yaakov ben Yosef, Theopolactus, right? Theopolactus, Sicilia and Anastasia. Amen ve'amen selah. Fascinating. People would be visiting the Temple Mount, or at least as close as they could get. And it's very inspiring to see these types of things. There's a number of these along the Temple Mount. We won't have time to go into Uri Tzvi Greenberg, although he's a fascinating character. He wrote a whole bunch of poetry. He's known as one of the founding poets in Israel, also known for a sort of foresight that he had. He said he had the sight and he actually wrote about the Holocaust in 1922. Before it happened, he would have types of visions. We're not going to go into him. He's a fascinating character, although I brought some words that he said because Tisha B'Av, the anniversary of the destruction of the temple, is coming around, and he was worried that we had missed that time as well. After 1967, he attempted to go up to the Temple Mount wearing tefillin and a talis, and he was promptly shooed away by the police, and it did not bode well for him, for his views on where we're going with the Temple Mount. Just a side note as well, he was in close contact with Rav Kook and would share his visions with Rav Kook, the original Rav Kook, Rav Avram Yitzchak Cohen Kook. But we don't have time to go into that right now. I want to spend a couple minutes on the foundation stone itself, the Even HaShtiyah. And I'm sorry, I might go over time a little bit. So feel free to exit if you wish. I don't want to keep anyone beyond the time. There's just so much to talk about in general. Things are a little bit rushed with these topics. But I'll spend a couple more minutes talking about the Even HaShtiyah, the foundation stone, and then I'll open the Zoom for questions if anyone has any further questions. Okay, so the foundation stone. The foundation stone, as we've mentioned before, is in the Dome of the Rock. And in the Dome of the Rock is built, and this is the only thing that this structure is meant to house, is this rock. In the times of the temple, in the first temple, that's where the Ark of Covenant used to be, as you can see in this drawing over here. Okay, so we have a question here that there are claims that the Muslims were doing some excavations and took out some of the findings from the Temple Mount. And the question is are some of these findings, were some of these findings saved? Fascinating question. This goes back to all the way back to the question we had earlier about where the Solomon's stables were, or Vot Shlomo. The reason is because in the 90s, Jordan, after they had signed a peace agreement with Israel, had felt kind of free with their newfound peace treaty that they had signed, and were feeling comfortable, and they had begun construction on the okay, another question, but they had done construction, basically removing all of this dirt from the area that we just call the Solomon Stables. They took all the dirt, and they had removed it, and basically tossing it into the valley that's next to the Temple Mount. I have another question here. I'll get to that in a second. But they had taken out all this dirt and just removed it, and that's number one, illegal, not only in Israel but also internationally. This is a heritage site. You can't just perform that kind of stuff, and of course, it destroys archaeology. It obviously destroys. Archaeology is built on the layers that you find. Every layer that you go down is another time period that you go down. And so just taking a bunch of dirt, throwing it somewhere, you really ruin that. That being said, there's a really fascinating initiative called the Sinun Afar Harabayit, the sifting, Temple Mount sifting project, which is fascinating. They've developed a method to basically organize them according to the time periods that they're from, sifting through all this dirt. And there's fascinating stuff that they found there. I'm not going to go into that now. I don't have the slides. Normally in my tours, we go over it, or more, normally in the experience, that Temple Mount experience that people that come with me have, we talk about that. I'm not going to address that right now, but it's true that there is a destruction of antiquities for sure that's being done on the Temple Mount. I have a question here about how do we know that this stone that we're looking at in this picture is the foundation stone, especially after all the earthquakes. So number one, the earthquakes that I spoke about earlier that happened, they happen about every 100 years in Israel, these earthquakes. The reason why the Al-Aqsa Mosque is damaged almost every time has to do with the fact that that whole section of the Temple Mount was extended by Herod. I noted that earlier, that entire area that Al-Aqsa is on is completely not original Temple Mount. Now, what that means is that further into the Temple Mount proper, you have bedrock that's holding everything in place. And so everything is much more stable there, much less likely to be damaged in an earthquake. And so Al-Aqsa is pretty much, on a shaky foundation. And so because of that, we know for sure that the foundation stone was not there. It could not have been. That was an extension. Now, the question of how do we know whether that's the foundation stone, Even Ashtia, is indeed under the Dome of the Rock, is a huge discussion, which I would love some time to give a talk about, because it isn't as clear cut as I'm making it. But suffice it to say that it's almost definitely in halacha. It's almost I don't want to go into halacha right now, but there's a lot of evidence stating that, and it's the basic Masorah, the basic tradition that Jews and Muslims have, is that the foundation stone was where the Dome of the Rock is, although it's a whole other discussion I don't want to get into right now. Okay, so there's three things I wanted to mention about the foundation stone. As we noted, they were the Holy of Holies, according to most opinions. In the first temple, that's where the Ark of Covenant was on, as you can see in this picture. In the second temple period, it was bare floor. There was no Ark of Covenant because it was already hidden or taken. And the foundation stone was stuck up in our sources, at least. It says 3 fingers. It was coming out of the floor of the Holy of Holies by 3 finger breadths. That's how it's described. And so this is the state that it's in right now. And I want to talk about the surface of why it has all these marks on it. I want to talk about cave underneath it, and I want to just mention a quick story as well. So first, I'm going to show you some pictures that a friend of mine, actually, who people don't really go into the Dome of the Rock in general these days. It's not only halachically questionable, but even for Muslims, people don't really go in there that much today. Some of the only people who go in there are Israeli Defense Force members, one of which is a friend of mine, actually, who went into the Dome of the Rock and took these pictures, which I'm going to show you. So the quality is mostly good. This picture is not so good, but this is the actual top of the dome from the inside. Okay, so that's how that looks. These are the windows. I just wanted to share this with you because it's just fascinating. A friend of mine sent me these. I thought these were incredible. This is how it looks from the inside. Absolutely beautiful inside. And this is a close-up of the rock itself, and the structure from a little bit of a different angle. Okay. And this sort of painting we have on the left here is how it looked pretty much in the late 1800s. Again, I said that the PEF came, they conducted a few studies, and that's pretty much all we have from those time periods, from early archaeology. And so this is how it looked then. There was no railing. It was completely changed, and things were added onto in order to make it look like the picture on the right. Moving on, I want to just point out some of these sort of dents or indents, I should call them, in the rock of the Dome of the Rock. So number one, we pointed out the hole that's on the top left over there. We pointed out the two things that might be connected to. The sort of like the longer line on the right here, sort of flattened down, is argued by many archaeologists to be actually the sort of wall or so, or steps for either, and this is again, like this is where an archaeologist needs to actually go do some research, needs to actually go in, and actually see. But the one opinion is that this is a sort of, this is where the wall of the Holy of Holies went across here, and so that's why you have that indent. And the other view is that this was a sort of, at the times of the Crusaders, who had the times of the Crusaders, who were around basically from 199 for about 1099, excuse me, for about 100 years. They had converted the Temple Mount area into a huge church called Templum Domini, the Lord's Temple, although they did not understand at all what they were looking at. And what I mean by that is, in general, the Europeans of that time were not as educated like the Europeans in our time. They didn't really understand what they were looking at on the Temple Mount, and they had assumed that the temple was facing the opposite direction as like a church which faced east. Excuse me, you walk in order so that you face the east, whereas in the temple, the Jewish temple, you walk with your back to the east as opposed to your front. It's the opposite side. And so the Templars, the Crusaders, had built their church in the wrong way, and so they took the Even Ashtiyah, the foundation stone, to be the place of the altar, the Mizbeach, in which case they started building on it. In addition to that, on the right, you see this kind of square. There are these pieces sort of missing in. It looks as if someone took a chisel and sort of chiseled them away. Indeed, that is actually from the Crusaders as well. They went in and they decided they were going to sell parts of the Temple Mount in order to make a profit, and in order to pay for their crusade on the Holy Land. And so they had actually dug into the Temple Mount, taking pieces off of the foundation stone and selling it. And that's where these indents are from. Very sad, actually. On a happier note, on the right, you have this sort of angle in the middle, and as Rittmeyer argues, again, Rittmeyer is one of the top archaeologists for sure for the Temple Mount in all of Israel today. He argues that this was actually the place where the Holy Ark was put down. I have another question here. How do you know that the second temple was built exactly where the first one was? That's an excellent question. Again, there's two ways to approach a question like this. There's the approach where you can take the halachic or Jewish tradition approach, and there's the approach that you can take that's the archaeology approach. Now, the archaeological approach is fraught with danger since there's been no archaeology done on the site. As you've noted, most of the things that I've mentioned are either things that have been discovered in the late 1800s, pits of water and that kind of thing, or there are things that you can note from just a cursory glance at the surface of the Temple Mount, because no digging has been done. So again, there's two ways to approach that. The archaeological approach, not so good. The halachic approach is for sure that the second temple was built where the first temple is. The Talmudic sources go into talking about how the Nevi'im at the time, Chagai and Zechariah, pointed out where each individual thing was. They pointed out where the Mizbeach was. They pointed out where the Even Ashtiyah was, in order so that they wouldn't make a mistake where these things were. All right, so where the first temple was where the second temple was, according to Jewish tradition in general. Again, big topic we can talk about. Another thing I want to mention right before we kind of conclude very soon is that this picture here I have is the Dome of the Rock. And you can see where it says D and F, that you have these sorts of caves underneath the foundation stone, the dome, underneath the dome of the rock. The cave, which is labeled as F here, is known as the pit of souls in Muslim legends. The pit of souls, Bora Ukhot. And the Muslim tradition there is that this is the cave where all souls are before they are born. They go to this place, or they are kept there, or something along those lines. And you should never open up the entrance to it from D, which is the cave that's directly underneath the dome of the underneath the Even Ashtiyah. You should never open it up. So goes the Muslim tradition. As well, they have another tradition that states that this is sort of like a cap, like a bottle cap on the waters of creation, that they should never come up from there. And there are Jewish sources as well that mention something similar along those lines, as King David HaMelech, at certain points, the Tehom, the underwater subterranean water sources were going to flood the world, and he threw in a piece of paper with the name of God on it, and the water subsided. Similar but different, but this is, in any case, the Muslim tradition of that here. As well as, like I said before, the place of the Aron HaBrit, the Ark of Covenant. These caves must be connected if that's the tradition. You'd assume that these would some way be connected to that. The way that looks, no one is pretty much allowed down there into the pit of souls for sure. But this area, that first cave underneath the Temple Mount, underneath the Even Ashtiyah, looks like this. In 2015. Normally, this whole area is covered by a rug, and in 2015, for a rare brief period, the Jordanian Waqf was conducting they wanted to basically fix it up a little bit, change the rug, and they revealed this underneath it. This type of opus sectile, it's called. It's a type of way of cutting stone, marble. It's marble over here, which you can date to the Byzantine period. Interestingly enough, who put it there? Very hard to tell. At the turn from Christianity to Islam, when the Umayyads, when the Muslims had conquered Jerusalem from the Byzantines, the artisans, the only architects, the only artisans that they had at the time were Byzantine, and so a lot of ways the early Muslim architecture in Jerusalem actually looks very Byzantine. So it's very hard to tell who put this here, but in any case, it kind of blocks the hole leading to the pit of souls underneath. And so that's a very interesting thing as well. This is painting as well from the late 1800s, like a lot of our sources are, and it looks very, very similar to what we see today. Okay, so now what I wanted to mention here is this chamber called the Parva Chamber, Lishkata Parva. This is one of the last things I'm going to mention before we open up everything for questions. The Parva Chamber has a sort of an interesting story to it. And firstly, I'm going to start with a man named Pyreti. A man named Pyreti, who again, late 1800s, he came to Jerusalem in order to try and conduct some studies on the Temple Mount, and specifically the tunnels underneath the Temple Mount. Now, he wrote about in his book how he decided to come from the north of the Temple Mount down, and he tried to get underneath the Dome of the Rock from a tunnel that he found in the north part of the Temple Mount. And it's very contended. And I say that because people sort of deny that he really knew where he was going. The lighting was not so good. No one really knows how the inside of these tunnels look. And so people don't really know if what he's saying is actually correct. He thinks so. He thinks he ended up underneath the Temple Mount. He thinks he ended up in the Pit of Souls, actually. But it's very contended. And how is that connected to the Parva Chamber? I just thought it was very similar to the story that we have of the Parva Chamber. The Parva Chamber was the personal office of the high priest, of the Kohen Gadol. Okay, located, if you see on this on the map of the temple, like the one that looks more complete, not the topographical map, but the model on the right back part of it, you see there's 3 buildings there. So among those buildings there was the Parva chamber, the Kohen Gadol's high priest's chamber. And the story behind it, why is it called Parva? So a tradition has it in the Talmud that Parva is actually the name of a magician, or some sort of religious figure from Persian Zoroastrianism. It's kind of hard to tell exactly what the word is that they use. Gosh is the word that they use, which is a Farsi word. Gosh is the same word as magic. It's taken from Farsi, the word magic in English. Gosh is sort of like a magician, but it also has like a position in Zoroastrianism. Anyways, this man, Parva, had attempted to figure out, he was fascinated by how the Jews conduct their services in the temple. And he actually decided that he was going to bury into the temple from the north, underneath the ground, and he was going to pop up in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, which is the day that the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, goes into the Holy of Holies in order to do the service there. It's the only time of the year where the high priest is allowed in there, really. And so he thought he was going to pop up right there, just as Pireti thought. And just like Pireti came from the north, and he ended up popping up in some sort of tunnel near there. And he was discovered by the Kohanim, by the priests, and he was dealt with. It's unclear exactly what happened with him, but they decided to name the chamber after him, because the chamber of the high priest was where they had discovered him. At least that's how they built it. Now, I'm sharing this story as well to end what we've been sort of talking about today, because in addition to that tradition, another tradition on Parva states that Parva was, in addition to being fascinated in what goes on in the temple, he actually was Choser B'Tshuva. He was a Jew who returned to repentance, and he understood that what he did to bury into the Temple Mount was wrong. That's not the right way to approach these things. Instead, he needs to come close to the holiness in other ways. And so what he did was he actually constructed the chamber of the high priest. Therefore, they called it Parva after this person who they had discovered, and then who promptly did tshuva to fix it. Now, reason why I share that is because I think that in many ways, the Temple Mount has been a place of taboo. People have not really spoken about the Temple Mount itself, although we hear about it all the time in Jewish sources. It's the spiritual center, the hub of the world in Judaism, but it's become sort of taboo to talk about it. Instead, people kind of glance over it and move to the Kotel, which is also a holy place, the Western Wall, but it's holy in that it's close to the Temple Mount, and and so the Temple Mount is the real thing here. And I believe that it's something that we all need to come closer to and become curious about, and to ask questions and to come close to in the appropriate ways. That concludes the main thing I wanted to talk about. I just have a few kind of recent developments that I just wanted to share with you all. So please, it'll just be another about 5 minutes or so. And thank you for all your attention. But some recent developments include, sadly, the misuse and abuse of the Temple Mount by those who are there more often than Jews. Not that Jews wouldn't go, but that they are not allowed to go throughout most of the times of the day. As you can see on the left, there's a man here, just a few months ago, I think this was during Pesach time, they had all sort of had a they had planned to basically attack the police there and the Jews who went up on Pesach with these rocks that you can see there. This is inside Al-Aqsa Mosque itself. So much for holy place. So you can see that there. It's very sad that that's the case, as well as on the bottom you can kind of see what kind of holiness they take up the place. They're uploading stuff to TikTok from it. playing soccer on the place of, of the place of the temple. It's as a Jew seeing this is very difficult for me to see. And this is the type of stuff we're going up to try and fix. As well as you can kind of see a heading over here of really, I really don't even want to get into it. It's of a Muslim man who had actually was going to the bathroom on the temple, it's on Temple Mount itself, which is to everyone, that's something disgusting to do. As well, this is also during Pesach. And typically the Temple Mount is a very beautiful place to go up to, very calm, very safe. Sometimes on big days like Tisha B'Av or Pesach, you can kind of get things like that. And here's a video I wanted to bring of one of the Minyanim that we have every single day for Shacharit and for Mincha on the Temple Mount. Here it is. As you can see, we're on the eastern part of the Temple Mount. That's where we are. And this is, as you can see, prayer is allowed on some measure on the Temple Mount. Whenever you see this kind of stuff being spoken about in the news, think back to this video. There are lots of restrictions to this. There are lots of restrictions to prayer on the Temple Mount, but we've seen a lot of improvement on the Temple Mount in terms of freedom of religion. Definitely not even close to how much there should be in a democratic country, in an open space like the Temple Mount. We're not talking about inside a mosque. We're talking about the open space of the Temple Mount. It's a public area. And so to not allow prayer by anyone is not as undemocratic, to say the least. And so this is the kind of stuff we're working towards, and we'll see more change as we come to it. I have a question here before I end off. I have a question here. I'll just do this question that was just asked because it's a little bit quicker. Are there guards at the Minion on the Temple Mount? So there are guards throughout all the time that Jews are on the Temple Mount. That's something new that's been in place for maybe 2 decades or so, that Jews are only allowed up with a police escort. Anyone who's not Jewish, let's put it like this. There are 3 groups. There are the Muslim groups who can go up whenever they want through any gate, pretty much. There are the non-Muslims who are divided into tourists and into Jews. The tourists can kind of go up. They don't have any sort of police escort. They can walk around whenever they want, wherever they want. And the Jews who want to go up are only allowed up with a police escort. And often that is a severe hindrance to democratic rights, which is again something that we're trying to work on, and there has been improvement in that regard. So we have a very even better. We have someone stating that they had a guard, a police officer who did Birkat Kohanim with him on the Temple Mount, the priestly blessing, which is meant to be done on the Temple Mount. Let's put it like that, which is unbelievable. So you really do see change happening there. It's just very slow, and the more people that come up, the better. And we have a question with how did our holy Jewish place seem to become lost to us like this? Okay, so I'll get to that in a second. But how did our holy Jewish place become lost to us like this? It's a big question. I mean, it's basically the history of the Temple Mount. It's acquired by Jewish people, acquired, not captured, and until its destruction, it was the center of all Judaism, pretty much. Until its destruction, and for sure by the time the Second Temple was destroyed, and even afterwards, it continued to be. And sadly, it's the story of the Temple Mount is also the story of the Jewish people. The Jewish people, how did it get to it that the Jewish people were in exile for so long, 2,000 years, under the whims of all these different rulers and countries, and it's the same story. The Temple Mount is the same story. You know, it's been in use in different uses throughout history, but it's kept its Jewish places in a sense. That's something that I wanted to bring out throughout this talk. But sadly, yeah, it's something of a status quo that, you know, when we as Jews who return from the exile come back, and in 1967 we liberate the Temple Mount, people were afraid. It became taboo. It became something like, we're not ready for this type of change. And that's something that people lament year in and year out since 1967, because an opportunity was afforded to us to change the what's going on in the Temple Mount, and no one had done it. And it's just very sad that that's the situation. It started off with Moshe Dayan when it was conquered. Moshe Dayan immediately said, they got the keys from the Waqf, they got the keys to the Temple Mount. He immediately gave them back, basically under the argument that he was too afraid for a world war. Whether or not that's true it can be debated, that he was afraid. There's all sorts of theories on it, but it's basically this idea of continuing a status quo, which is something that we need to change mentally before we can really change it on the ground. Okay, so before I finish off here, I want to just say that what can we do now that this is over? So first of all, thank you everyone for sticking around this long. I know I went over the time. I hope you enjoyed, but so number one, consider joining Biadenu on a tour. We would love to have you guys. We would please consider taking part in our fundraising campaign. This is a link to my my own page on our campaign, and I'll post this in a second in the group chat. And of course, we have an English WhatsApp group for updates, so please feel free to message me. I'm going to actually put in my email into the chat box. So if anyone wishes to become part of any of these things or get involved or ask questions or anything like that, please ask. As well as I can open up the chat, the chat maybe for questions if people have any. Let me just do that. All right, so if anyone has any questions, they can definitely click to talk, and they can ask me very, you know, if anyone has questions or anything. Otherwise, thank you very much everyone for sticking around and for listening, and we'd love to see you, and we'd love to have you with us. So thank you.
That was great.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Alex.
Did he say it's gonna be on Facebook? We can watch it again?
I think it was live streaming on Facebook. And as soon as I exit, it should also be something that you can watch and rewind, or if you want to see things again and again, maybe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeshikoa.
I didn't see any women on the mount. Are they allowed up with the men?
Yeah, I've been up there.
Absolutely, yeah. So like we just heard, definitely women come up. Again, I'm not talking on a halachic basis. That's something that you should talk to either Rabbi Korobkin or whatever rabbi you're in touch with about about halachic issues. But in general, women definitely come to the Temple Mount. As you've heard, there was a women's courtyard on the Temple Mount. And so definitely women were going up in the times of the temple and all throughout history, as well as including now. Women definitely come up. I will say that this is not with the Biadenu, it's with another group. There's another organization called Nashim Leman HaMikdash, Women for the Temple, and they go up once a month as a group, just women. And so you can look them up as well. Nashim Leman HaMikdash, Women for the Temple, and so they go up. It's just groups of women going to the Temple Mount.
And you go to the mikvah beforehand.
I get it, right. So first of all, I'm not going into all the halachas about going to the mikvah, not going to the mikvah. Definitely talk to a halachic authority before that, but in general, absolutely, mikvah beforehand.
That skewed wall you showed us, that angle, which direction is that? on the east, on the west, on the north, on the south?
On the east.
Let me see if I can
That's
go up. Okay.
That
Oh,
would
I don't know
be
what's
east.
happened again. Okay, 1 second.
that would be on the east side.
That would be that would be on the east side. Yeah, definitely on the east side. Let me just get it open here so everyone can see it. Can everyone still see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let me just get that open. So what you're asking about, oops, is basically the area where these on the picture on the right, the aerial photo from the British Mandate. So this would be like from the Golden Dome in the center to the end of those two lines that are pointed out with the arrows. All that would be the temple, and the angle that would be on the eastern side of this of the raised platform. That's where that is. The video that I showed you of where everyone was davening was from right before. It's on the more eastern side, sort of like if you look at the picture in the middle. It's at like the entrance to the women's courtyard. If the women's courtyard is that square that kind of sticks out with the 4 squares inside of it on the right, the picture in the middle, but on the right side of that picture, then the people davening would be davening kind of like towards the right of that of the entrance into the women's courtyard. I hope that was clear.
Except that you showed us that the Jews were only allowed in from the gate near the western wall. So if we're on the west, how are we now allowed in on the eastern side?
Right. So that's kind of my issue here, not having like a sort of a pointer here to show you guys. But this picture here, with this map of the route that we take, the red dotted line is the route that we take. So we enter from the top of the picture, from next to the western wall, and we walk eastwards, right, along this dotted red line, and then we turn left and go along the eastern wall, making sure not to enter into the area that might have been part of the women's courtyard. There are halachic considerations to that, but people praying, we're praying like, towards the temple in that area that you can see. This is actually on the picture on the right, on the bottom. That's where we were standing, and that's kind of like what you'd be seeing. You'd be seeing that golden gate on the picture on the top of that. I hope that this is clear. I've never actually used Zoom to show this. Normally I can use my hands, so basically when we visit the Temple Mount on a tour, we do a circuit. We go all around the Temple Mount. We just don't enter the middle portion of it where the elevated platform is.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
It's a little confusing when you haven't been there.
I know. It definitely is a little bit confusing, especially to orientate yourself. That's why I tried at the beginning to pick out some things that you could orientate yourself with, like the Golden Dome, the elevated platform. But I know what you mean. I know it's one of those things like
with your pointer. Where's the Holy of Holies with your pointer?
Do you see my pointer right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, amazing. So the Holy of Holies is where my pointer is now. This area here, this is the dome underneath here, this, and this area here is superimposed onto the picture. Is this basically the main area of the temple itself? If I were to point that out, that would be this structure here is the blue and yellow structure here.
Okay.
And so, as you can see, it's divided into 2 areas. There's this kind of square with the 4 chambers here. This was what was called the women's courtyard, Ezrat Nashim. And inside of it is this blue area where the actual temple structure itself was, along with the Mizbeach, the altar where the sacrifices were brought. by the Kohanim.
Okay, much clearer.
Okay, happy. Let me see if I have any.
Excellent.
Thank you. Okay, someone has asked for a link for the Tahara process, for how to become halachically in a status of purity. I can send that to anyone who wishes. Just send me an email or a message. Actually, I'll write my my phone number in here as well. Feel free to message me or even send me an email with any questions, and then I can send you a information packet on that. Send it to everyone. Okay, and yeah, and my email is sending that now. Okay. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming.
Can you
I'm gonna
show your
sign off.
email on the screen for me, please?
Absolutely. Let me just write it in, actually. Let me make a new slide. This is my email here, Alexander Huberman @gmail. Okay, and my number. All right, feel free to email me with any questions or queries or anything like that, or feedback. I would love feedback as well from anyone if they want to give me. And yeah, we hope to see you at the Temple Mount at some point, whether, hopefully in the building of the temple on Tisha B'Av this year. And if not, anyone is welcome to come with me at any point. And we hope for good news. So have a great day.
Amen.
Everyone.
Thank you for a beautiful presentation.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Are you related to the Hubermans in Ottawa and Montreal?
Good question. I don't think so. I don't think,
Okay.
not that I know. I'm sure we're all related in some way.
Okay, thank you.
All
Bye.
right. Bye-bye.